And welcome again to Cottage Talk. I am Russ Goldman. This is another episode of Fulham News and Notes, and this is for March the 16th, 2023, which is a Thursday. Just a heads up, we will have a preview of the Manchester United match on Sunday for Fulham in the FA Cup coming up soon. But today, we're going to be talking about some familiar subjects because there was an interesting article that dropped late yesterday from Dean Jones in GiveMeSport.com. Dean has some good sources usually when it comes to Fulham, so I'm taking this article seriously and I'm going to break it down and share my thoughts. There'll be some familiar topics that I've been talking about recently, but there's some interesting angles to this story, and that's why I'm going to comment on it. As always, please do subscribe on YouTube and Apple Podcasts. It does help other Fulham supporters find us. Okay, so let's get to it. And this is from GiveMeSport.com. Dean Jones, who's actually been on Cottage Talk years ago. He's someone that I have a lot of respect for. So when he writes something about Fulham, I listen. I really do. And I read what he has to say and I take it seriously. So I'm going to read from his article and then I'm going to comment on it. There are three topics we're going to be talking about. Two are extremely familiar. One is Marco Silva, one is João Palhinha, and the third is to deal with Fulham could be interested in bringing in a new striker this summer. So I'm going to be tackling all three from Dean's article that he dropped yesterday. So here is the title of it, and it's called Fulham Hoping for Internal Agreement Soon with Key Figure at Craven Cottage. Okay, so here is from the article written by Dean Jones. Fulham remain confident Marco Silva and João Palhinha will remain at the club beyond this season. Speculation has been rifled this week around the future of both men, with boss Silva linked with Tottenham Hotspur job and midfielder Palhinha linked with Manchester United and Liverpool. So this is what he has to say. We're going to first talk about the update that he has or what he's saying about the situation with Marco Silva. So this is from Dean Jones from Give Me Sports. This is where we're going to start. Fulham have been in talks with Silva about a new deal, and while it's true that the agreement has not been signed off as expected, there is hope it will soon be sorted. The club are willing to reward him for the job he has done in winning promotion and then establishing them back to the top flight, but there's been a pause to gauge how the signing of a new deal might impact any interest from elsewhere. Spurs are on the lookout for a new head coach for next season, with Antonio Conte set to leave when his contract expires, and Silva's situation could put him in the running for that job. Fulham know he is enjoying his time at Fulham, though, and hope his new deal is penned by the end of the season so they can focus on strengthening further for next season with him at the helm. Okay, now that is an excerpt from Give Me Sports article about Marco Silva. So I've mentioned this before. We've had several people writing about this, but what's interesting, coming from someone that I have a lot of respect for, that I know has good sourcing when it comes to Fulham, I'm taking this very seriously, that Dean is hearing some good things about what is going on between Fulham and Marco Silva. And of course, we want a deal done sooner than later. Interesting that he points out, hopefully by the end of the season, so they can look to strengthen for next season. I talked about an article yesterday that from Peter O'Rourke that said Fulham could be giving him a good amount of money to spend this summer. That's great. This article from Dean basically is putting it out there that what is he hearing, that there could be a deal hopefully by the end of the season. So with that said, this to me is encouraging news. But again, until Marco Silva signs with anything, we have to be cognizant that things could happen. But hopefully Dean is correct and that a deal could happen in the future, hopefully sooner than later, for Marco Silva. So that's part one of this podcast today. Part two involves the situation with João Palhinha. And this is what Dean writes about that. Will Fulham be able to keep João Palhinha? And this is from the article. And they hope that will include having star man Palhinha involved too. Silva was a very important factor in convincing him to join Fulham ahead of Wolves last summer and has proved a masterstroke with a 17 million pound transfer proven to be one of the signings of the season. His market value has rocketed towards 50 million pounds. And while it's understood Liverpool do have him on a watch list, Fulham believe he will be staying in West London for at least one more season. The club will soon begin planning the next stage of their evolution by making early moves in the transfer market to reduce the fear or second season syndrome in the Premier League. Interesting stuff. So, what I took out of this article from Dean is Fulham are confident that they can hold on to João Palhinha for at least one more season. I find that interesting because I'm hoping that João Palhinha can be with Fulham long term. But I guess you can only take what you can get. And I understand why he's saying they're hoping for just one more season. I think that's also why you're seeing a lot of speculation in Brazil with Fulham being linked to defensive midfielders, because I think Fulham are trying to get ready for the future without Palhinha. So I think the idea, if I'm reading between the lines, is for Fulham to hold on to Palhinha for one more season and have a ready-made replacement in development next season to be ready for when he leaves the following season. That's what I'm getting from this. Now, I could be wrong on this, and this is what Dean's hearing, but I think it's encouraging that they feel confident that they will hold on to him for at least one more season. I think that's vital. As I said in the last episode, Fulham do not have any answers for João Palhinha. And I think even if they brought in a replacement over the summer, they're not going to know if he's good enough to replace Palhinha. If you bring in a player and you give him that season to learn with Palhinha still there, and then Palhinha wants to go in a couple of seasons, okay, you have someone to replace him. And I think that's the way for Fulham to look at things moving forward, because other clubs have done this. You have to have a ready-made replacement if you're letting players go. Other clubs have done this, like Brighton. They've actually done a very good job of this. They've moved on. When Trossard left, they were ready to go. Fulham need to do the same thing, because they're never going to be a top four club that can just pick up whatever they need out of moments when. They're not going to be that. So what they have to be is clever and forward thinking, and they need to have replacements ready to go once a player leaves, thinking about leaving. So this to me is encouraging that Fulham potentially could hold on to him for at least one more season. And then my hope is that they bring in someone else and let him learn for a full season and then be ready to take the place to João Palhinha. That's forward thinking. So that's what I hope is going on with this. Very interesting stuff from Dean. Finally, in his article, he says, what will Fulham prioritize for new signings this summer? So this is what Dean wrote. A new striker is one of the key areas of interest ahead of the summer as they consider alternate options to Alexander Mitrovic. There is no suggestion that Serbia striker will be leaving, yet he has struggled a little with fitness before the World Cup, and his last goal came in the beginning of January. There is a feeling they need to add extra depth to the squad in the striker position. Carlos Vinicius is currently the backup option to Mitrovic, but scouts are assessing other interesting options across Europe too, with a view to raising the level of the squad. Interesting stuff. I've seen speculation with the Coventry forward, even recently with Fulham, and then there was some speculation of a player that's currently on loan with Sunderland from PSG that was just out there the last few days. So this to me is encouraging. Nothing against Carlos Vinicius. I think Fulham need really a true backup to Mitro and someone that, similar situation, that they can groom to take over when Mitro leaves. So if this is the direction Fulham are going, they are going in a positive direction. Forward thinking. Is it the same way with the striker position? I hope so. I don't see Mitro going anywhere this season, but I think you need to plan for his time of leaving. He will be leaving at some point. So you should have a ready-made striker ready to go. Same situation. Working under Mitro, and then when Mitro's ready to go, you have someone to take his place. Also to back him up during the season, because Vinicius has been, I would say, okay, but it would have been better if they had someone that was at a little bit higher of a level. I'm not saying Fulham got it wrong. I just wish that they got someone that actually could have fit Mitro's duties a little bit better than Carlos Vinicius. He's been okay. He just hasn't been to the level that I think we all had hoped he would be. Okay. So those are the three stories that I wanted to tackle from Dean Jones's article in GiveMeSport.com. Very interesting article. I hope you read it. And I find all parts of it encouraging. Like I mentioned, when Dean talks, I actually listen because I know that he has good sources when it comes to Fulham. He knows Fulham. Not saying directly he has sources with the club, but he knows what's going on with Fulham Football Club. So I'm just going to leave it there. That Dean's sourcing on it is usually pretty good. So that's why when he's hearing stuff, I tend to believe it. So very good stuff. Lastly, I do want to mention and want to give a shout out to Peter Rutzler on a very interesting article on Manor Solomon. And what's interesting about Manor Solomon, and I'll just share my thoughts on it. There is, again, the fervor in Israel has been tremendous, following every move of Manor Solomon. And I've been seeing that and hearing that as well. And I think it's great. I will say one thing, and this is something to really watch as we get to the end of the season and the chances of holding on to Manor Solomon. And this is just my opinion. I think it's going to be very difficult for Manor Solomon to come back to Fulham. I think he's going to be under a lot of pressure in his homeland to potentially sign with a bigger club. I just feel there will be some pressure. I'm not saying that he's going to go to a bigger club. I'm just thinking that, again, this is a big deal in Israel, and he might feel some pressure on that. I do hope he comes back to Fulham. I do hope he does. But he holds all the cards on this, Manor Solomon. And the more goals he scores, the more interest he's going to get. I think it's going to be difficult for Fulham to bring him back after the summer. I'm going to look at it. I'm going to enjoy the time Fulham have with him. I think he's going to continue to score goals. But I think it's a difficult situation for Fulham. But we shall see what happens. I hope that he does come back. I just think it's going to be a struggle to get him to come back to Fulham. That's just my opinion on that. Okay. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of Cottage Talk. As always, please do subscribe on YouTube and Apple Podcasts. It does help other Fulham supporters find us. Well, that's going to do it for this episode. My name is Russ Goldman. Thank you as always for watching and listening to Cottage Talk, now part of the talkSPORT Fan Network.